Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our second installment of our QuickBooks Quick Hits series. My name is Brittany. I'm a QuickBooks Pro advisor and also a supervisor here in the Management Advisory Services Group at SVA. Today, we're going to talk about recurring transactions in QuickBooks Online. Last week, we talked about setting up rules, and this is a little different than setting up rules. So I just want to highlight the differences as I start on the presentation. So they differ by both purpose and by user control. The purpose of rules are to automate the categorization of transactions, and the purpose of recurring transactions is to automate the creation of transactions in QuickBooks Online. So for recurring transactions, the user defines the schedule, amounts, and the details. And for rules, the user sets conditions and assigns categories. So what is a recurring transaction? It's a feature in QuickBooks Online that allows you to automate the creation of transactions that happen regularly. So monthly invoices, rent payments, subscription charges, payroll entries, things of that nature. And so, yeah, I'm going to get started. I'm going to work through a demonstration today. So I'm going to toggle to our sample company. Just give me a second. Okay, so there are some benefits to the recurring transactions in QuickBooks that I want to highlight before we walk through our demonstration. So this can save you time by reducing manual data entry. It can help with consistency in recurring charges or payments. It can help you avoid mistransactions in QuickBooks or deadlines. If you're reliant on your AP aging to help you with bill pay, you can get some of these automated monthly things on the AP aging 7 days in advance. So that way you can know what's up and coming. So there are certain transactions that you cannot add as a recurring transaction in QuickBooks Online. So customer payments, receiving a payment against an invoice is something that you wouldn't be able to add as a recurring transaction. Bank deposits is not something you can add. Transfers between accounts. So if you're doing a transfer from your checking account to your savings account, or vice versa, you're not allowed to add that or unable to add that as a recurring transaction. All inventory adjustments, payroll adjustments, sales tax payments, and any sort of time activity. So if you're using the QuickBooks Time feature, if you're using payroll within QuickBooks, you can't add any sort of recurring transactions based off payroll. And I did say sales tax payments only if you're using the sales tax payment the feature within QuickBooks. If you're adding a check, you're able to do that. So some of the transactions that you are allowed to add as a recurring transaction would be invoices, bills, expenses, checks, sales receipts, purchase orders, journal entries, things of that nature. So when you log into QuickBooks Online, there are two ways you can access the recurring transactions feature. I'm already on the screen, but I'm going to toggle back, pretend as if I'm logging in for the first time to Craig's Design and Landscaping Services. So I can come over to transactions on the left and come down to recurring transactions at the bottom, this tab right here, and it'll take me to the recurring transactions screen. I can also say, get rid of that, go to the settings gear wheel at the top right. I can click on that, and under lists, there's this recurring transactions feature. So if you click on that, it'll take you to the same place. Okay, so I'm going to give a demo of the three types of recurring templates that you're able to set up in QuickBooks Online. The first one that we're going to do is a scheduled bill recurring transaction. So once you hit new, it's going to pop up this little window. So you can select the different transaction type that you're doing. So we kind of went over this, but here's a list of all of the things that you can set up. I'm going to do bill, and then I'm going to hit OK. Okay, I'm going to exit out of here to make my screen a little bit bigger. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is type in the vendor name. So this is just a random entry, but let's say I pay Tony every single month for rent. So he's going to be my vendor, and you can see that it auto populates the template name to be the vendor that you've selected. You don't have to keep that. Sometimes if you have a really long list of recurring transactions, it's easier to identify if you leave the name, but we're just going to call this monthly rent. Okay, so here's where you would select your type. I went over that there are 3 that you can set up. There we go. Scheduled, reminder, and unscheduled. We're going to make this a scheduled recurring bill that's going to create 7 days in advance. That way, when you run a report to tell you what your upcoming bills are going to be, this will show up on that report for you. So our interval is going to be monthly on the first day of every month. And we're going to set up the start date just to be August 1st of 2025. And then this would be a good ending date for something like monthly rent would be, lease expiration. So just keep that in mind as you set up an end date. So we're going to do August 1st of 2026. We're just going to say that's when our lease expires. So our terms due on receipt, but you could select net 30, net 15, net 60, whatever your terms are. You can even create one from here if you don't see. So due on receipt, my category is going to be rent or lease. And then I'm just going to do monthly rent in the description because this template will carry from month to month. So you don't want to enter August rent in the description because every time this bill is created on the schedule, it will then say August rent. So you just want to be careful of that. And let's say it's $5,000 every month. And to review our details, we have monthly rent scheduled 7 days in advance to Tony. Creates on the first day of every month, starting August 1st, 2025, ending August 1st, 2026. And it's going to be due on receipt, and you just hit Save Template. And then it shows up here under your recurring transactions list. So this will auto create every single month because it's scheduled. It won't be something that you have to go in and set up. Versus our next recurring transaction that we're going to set up, which is a reminder. This prompts you to create the transaction manually on a schedule. So it won't automatically enter it into QuickBooks for you like a scheduled recurring transaction would. But a good time to maybe set up a reminder for something is, let's say you have certain terms with, one of your customers that every month they get a discount depending on their receivables for the prior month. Let's say it's like 10%. So every month in the first or second week, you have to create a credit memo to apply to one of their invoices for the month based on your agreement. So what you would want to do is you could do a recurring credit memo. And we're going to set this as a reminder. We'll pick Amy's Bird Sanctuary, and then you could just say monthly credit. You can create it 7 days in advance. I think a week before is good if you're, running reports or you want to know what's up and coming. And then depending on, whatever the agreement says, if you're doing monthly on the first day or you want to do it on the last day. So let's say every month on the last day, you have to enter a credit memo. Every month on the last Monday of every month. We'll do August 1st because that's an easy. And let's say you had this agreement for 2 months. So by October, they don't get credit memos anymore. And then just check the details. You could put discount down here. You could leave the amount blank because obviously the amount's something that's going to change depending on, which is why we would set this up as a reminder instead of like a scheduled transaction because that amount would change. So this is going to remind you, hey, you have to do this. It might even remind you of, oh yeah, I have to calculate that. So kind of just a good for that feature. So now just double checking the details. We have Amy's Bird Sanctuary, monthly credit, a reminder every 7 days before the transaction date. Customer is going to be Amy's Bird Sanctuary, and then product or service is going to be discount, save template. Okay. And then it shows up right here again in your recurring transactions list. So the last type of recurring transaction we can add is an unscheduled recurring transaction. So I think the best example I could use for this is a payroll or even a depreciation entry. So let's say your CPA sends you a number every single month and says, add this depreciation into your accounting software and you're like, what accounts do I use? Or is it a debit or is it a credit? So this would be a good time to set up an unscheduled recurring transaction. So let's change the type to unscheduled. We'll just call this depreciation. And let's say sometimes it's not every month. Let's say sometimes they send it monthly, sometimes it's, quarterly, whatever their frequency is. So you can kind of set up from there, leave that blank and you could do depreciation entry and then accumulated depreciation, which is not entered. So we'll just quickly enter this. And then just hit save template. So now every time you have to make that entry. And it's also a good one to do this with payroll because then you can just come to your recurring transactions template and payroll accounts don't typically change, just like the depreciation entry won't typically change. So you can just hit this use button and it pulls it up. It's blank, so you can just enter your amounts, change your date, and then hit save and close. So what's also good about having these templates is there are some options underneath. Use, duplicate, pause, so you could pause it, skip next date, or delete when they're no longer in use. So some common errors with recurring transactions in QuickBooks Online is using the wrong template type. If you're looking for full automation, use the scheduled type. If you want to review before posting, use the reminder type. And unscheduled is just manual. So you have the template, but you still have to go in, change the date, enter the amounts, adjust descriptions if needed. Sometimes if you're looking for it and it's not showing up, you might have the incorrect start date or the incorrect end date. So transactions won't generate if the start date is in the future or if the end date has already passed. Same with required fields. It won't generate if you're missing a required field, like a customer name, an account, something like that. And then watch for duplicate entries, especially if you're using the bank transactions feature, which we kind of went over in our last webinar. But as a refresher, if you were adding transactions through the banking feature in QuickBooks and you also have recurring expenses or checks, just kind of be mindful if they're matching down here properly or if they aren't. Like if you know every single month, hey, my rent check should match or my health insurance expense should match, and you see the transaction, but it's not here, something might be wrong. Or it might be pennies off, because even if it's pennies off, it won't know to match it with that. So just make sure if you're using this feature that you're regularly reviewing your ledger, your bank recs, just so you don't have a bunch of duplicate entries, because that can, if gone on for too long, can create a mess for you to have to clean up. And then be sure you don't inactivate any customers or vendors that are used on templates for the recurring transactions, because then they won't post. So you would also have that issue of duplicate entries, or not duplicate entries, but missing transactions when you go to do your bank recs. Okay, I'm going back to my slides really quick because I do have something put together. I have a little recurring transactions checklist for your use or memorization. If you can't memorize all of this, I just encourage you to reach out to me directly. If you're thinking that this is something that you want to set up and maybe you're unsure how or something wasn't clear, reach out to me. I can send you this checklist. I can help you get things started. We can kind of go over other transactions that would fit one of the three molds of scheduled, reminder, or unscheduled. Here's kind of the rest of the recurring transactions checklist. So I'll leave that up for a second. And yeah, that is all I have for you today. Please join us for our next webinar. I'm going to get into more of the automated workflows in QuickBooks Online. And yeah, I really appreciate all of your time today. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. So, thank you so much.